Hi, this is Katie D at the Well Studio, and today I want to take you through some different ankle and foot strengthening exercises that will not only help you strengthen your lower body exercises, but create better balance, less knee pain, less hip pain, and even less back pain. I highly recommend doing these barefoot, and if you need any equipment, you really only need a mat if you prefer. So the first thing I want everyone to try is with your bare feet, how far can you spread your toes and then let them relax into the ground without them scrunching? Just do that a few times. We tend to wear footwear that really squishes our toes, especially if you wear high heels a lot. And what that does is it really starts to weaken the muscles and tendons in our feet, as well as the arches of our feet, which will make our balance a little bit worse and can even cause things like bunions, plantar fasciitis, and so forth. So once you've practiced that toe spread a little bit, we're going to work our way into what's called a foot screw. So what I like to imagine is when I put my foot on an angle like this, if someone was to screw the big toe, the ball of the big toe down to the ground, so I'm really pushing into it. You don't have to press hard, don't want to cause any pain, but I definitely am putting a lot of weight on that toe. Then I'm going to spin around that big toe, still pushing down on it. Once my knee, hip, and heel becomes parallel, I'm going to slowly place that heel down to the ground. When you do this, you should feel that medial arch, that big inside arch, engage. You don't want to just kind of twist back and forth because you won't feel anything. So again, I'm going to turn my knee in, press down all the way from my big toe, ball of that big toe, really keep that pressure down. You can imagine there's a screw holding the ball of your big toe in place until your leg is parallel, and then put it down. You want to do this until you feel that muscle starting to get fatigued. So for some of you, that might be 5 or 10 reps. For some of you, it might be 15 or 20. And then once you need to let that foot rest, you're just going to try it on the other side. And you'll notice that one side does this easier or has more or less range of motion, or you may even feel a little bit more pressure in the big toe. As you're doing that, I want you to start to think about if that side of your foot is the tighter side, is that also the side you tend to have knee pain or back pain or worse balance on? From there, we're going to use that foot screw in our exercises. So for example, a squat. Now with a squat, you can have your feet parallel and more narrow. You can have them a little wider or even turned out into a sumo stance. Whatever your joints prefer the best is where I want you to work. So I'll show examples in each one. Again, I'm going to find that foot screw on each foot so that my arch is engaging. What that does, if I have my arch engaged, it really helps my ankles stop from dropping in, which as you can see, when my ankles drop in, so do my knees. And then sometimes we collapse through that low back. So by engaging those arches and finding a full foot on the ground, that really helps to stabilize and also strengthen better. So again, if you're doing just body weight or adding a band or a dumbbell, you can always do that. But just seeing how deep of a squat can I go without letting my ankles and knees collapse a whole lot here. Again, you can always try a little bit wider stance. Same idea. I'm still going to find that foot screw. Make sure the arches of your feet are engaged and I'm really stable, heel to toe. And just play around with each stance and see which one feels best for your joints. And if I turn to the side here, again, you want to make sure that as you're going down, you don't see the back of that heel lift up off of the ground. So your knees are allowed to go over your toes. That's totally fine. Again, as long as I have the back of that foot sealed down to the ground by utilizing that foot screw. When you're doing any kind of standing exercise, especially for lower body, you want to create a tripod with your foot. So your heel is one point, the ball of your pinky toe is one, and the ball of your big toe is another one. So you want to find all 3 points secured to the ground. Now, when we're doing something like a squat, and you find that tripod, you find the arches of your feet, you can also further play around with it, again, by either letting your knees go a little more forward. That's going to become a little bit more quad-based. Or if you allow yourself to hinge forward a little bit more, where my knee is now a little bit more over my ankle rather than my toe, that's going to be more glute-based. Neither is right or wrong. It just depends on A, what feels best for your body, and B, what is their muscle group that you're trying to work on. You can use this same method in so many different exercises. For example, a lunge. So if you find your lunge stance, if you need to hold on to something with one or two hands, please do. I'd rather you really focus on the form and this feels good than feeling like you're gonna fall over. Same thing as my squat. I still wanna make sure I find that foot screw so that the arch of my foot is engaged. And then same thing as the squat, my knee can either be a little bit more forward and my torso is a little bit more upright. Again, I'm gonna hit a little bit more through that quad. I'll show you from the side here as well. So a little bit more upright where that knee is allowed to go a little bit more forward. Or if you want to hinge back a little bit more. And now my knee is going to track over my ankle. I'm going to get a little bit more glute based. Make sure you're always trying both methods on each side so you can see the difference on one side or the other. Do you have better balance on one side? Again, always checking for that foot, arch, ankle engagement. Whether you're squatting or you're lunging, lastly, you also want to pay attention to where your kneecaps are. So it's going to be a little bit different just based off of how far and wide your legs are, but you want to make sure your knees are more or less tracking down the center of your shin over that second or third toe, just depending on how wide your feet are. If this feels really uncomfortable in flat feet without any shoes, I would highly recommend using your tennis shoes, but maybe taking the insole out so you can still feel your foot a little bit better. Now, if we're doing an exercise laying on the ground, again, this is where you may want to grab a mat if that feels more comfortable for you. Even though I'm a lot more supported, I still want to think about those feet and what they're doing to translate up my body. So with a bridge, for example, still want to make sure I find that tripod. Heels are down, ball of the big toe is down, ball of that pinky toe is down. So I'm always giving myself a really stable base to start from. And rather than thinking about lifting your hips straight up to the ceiling, I want you to think about starting with your hips. So imagine the bony bits of your hips first before your hips even lift, scooping towards that rib cage. Try that a few times and just find that pelvic tilt here. As you're going, you might even feel a little bit of engagement through that core. And I want you to think about maintaining that while maintaining your tripod. It's a lot to think about, I know. Find that. And then from there, as I bridge up, I'm just bridging as high as I can without losing my tripod at my feet and without losing that pelvic tilt here. So we're not getting into that low back or feeling any knee pain. I can really stabilize my core and really focus on my posterior. Now, if that feels really, really easy for you, there's a few different variations that you can try. The first one, the hardest one, is to transition to a single leg. And just like your lunge, you're going to feel a difference on each side. Now, when you are doing a single leg exercise, you still want to make sure, even though it's harder to see here, that your knee is not dropping in, that ankle is not dropping in. So I'm still trying to think, if my knee were to be tracking towards that second or third toe, I'm still focused on that arch of my foot, being really, really active here. If that feels too advanced for you, there's two other options. You can take a figure four that's a little bit more supported, still very much a single leg, and still focusing on engage through that hip first, find that little pelvic tilt, maintain that as you go up and down. And if that feels uncomfortable or you feel any pressure in your knees, your low back, you can take what's called a B stance. So I'm going to extend this foot out a little bit, so it's going to give me some support. So I still have about 90% of my weight in that working leg, but I've got a little bit of support here to help focus on that balance. And once again, noticing, does each side feel any different? So that as you are transitioning to a standing exercise where you have less support, you can focus on the side that maybe feels a little bit more wobbly. And while we're down here on the ground, I also want to cover a little bit of how your breathing and your core is going to work into all of these exercises. So again, it's harder to see because you don't have your head lifted unless you wanted a pillow under your head if that feels comfortable for you. But I always like to think about the very top of my rib cage, find that kind of core engagement there. Breathing in and relaxing out. So rather than thinking about breathing up towards the sky, which we get a little too much movement through the back sometimes, almost like my rib cage could expand laterally out towards the wall. So find that nice deep breath. Think about the very bottom of your rib cage, exhaling, relaxing down towards my belly button. I'm not sucking it in. You still should be able to breathe in this movement. So find that contraction down, find that pelvic tilt and scoop here. Without even moving anything, you should already start to feel some really good core engagement. And you want to focus on, can I maintain that as I'm doing an exercise here? Practice it with exercises on the ground, practice it with your squats, with your lunges, with your overhead presses, your push-ups, your yoga balance poses. See, what is it? Always check in. What is my core doing? Is it helping me or is it hurting me? If this feels a little bit too easy for you, you can flip on over into an all fours position. Start from the head and work your way down to the tail. So first, gently press those shoulders away from my ears. Notice my face is kind of between my hands rather than behind my hands. Our body really likes this position. It's a lot easier. But when I get here and then push those shoulders down, and same thing, find that scoop through the front of your hips there. And if that's enough for you, you can just stay there. Just feel that core really working. This you can also transition to a kneeling plank, a regular plank. You can go into a bird dog with an extension. You can focus on, where do I feel this the most? When you're doing that, you can also tuck your toes if that feels more comfortable, or go ahead and bring them down. In a standing exercise, for example, going back to our squats, again, always start with those toes. Find that foot screw. Find the wide or narrow position that works best for you. Take a big deep breath in. And on that exhale, and imagine that very bottom of your rib cage kind of contracting down, front of the hips kind of scooping up, and trying to keep a little bit of that engagement as you squat. So as you're going, you may find that changes your range of motion, which is totally normal. One common theme I will hear a lot with squats is either someone feels their low back or they feel their knees. So in order to kind of figure out which one is, what area is causing that pain, start by looking at your core, look at your feet and your ankles. So if you're noticing a lot of knee pain as you're squatting, you might see that your heels are lifting a little bit or even collapsing in. I'm exaggerating here, but take a look at your feet and see, is my pinky toe to my heel sealed down? And if it's really challenging for you to keep that heel down, working in some specific ankle exercises, both for mobility and stability, be really, really helpful. And then it could also play around with having a little bit different stance. For now, more of a glute-based stance so that you can focus on keeping that heel down. If that doesn't seem to be the issue, and you're still feeling pain, again, knees, maybe your low back, maybe both, check on that rib cage. So as I'm squatting, I am not allowing that rib cage to flare forward. Nice big breath in, nice little contraction down, a little bit of scoop up. You don't have to go the total opposite way. Just find that core engagement a little bit and see how far can I go down without dumping that rib cage forward. A really good rule of thumb is when you're working, if I can look down and all I see is rib cage, then we're probably not engaging through here. So don't sacrifice your form or your range of motion to just get down as low as you can or do as hard as you can and not have your core working out for you. All of this, like I said, will also transition into being able to balance a little better. We'll all have one side that has a little bit better balance. So play around with just first finding out which side feels easier. Please feel free to put your hand on a wall or something steady, one hand, two hand, whatever works better for you. And then again, find that foot screw. Go back to your beginning here. Find your balance. And then while you're here, see, does that feel a little bit different once I have my arch engaged? You also want to notice where your hips are going with that. So as you're in your balance, you're not compensating by pushing your hip out to the side. You want to think about your hip being right underneath your shoulder. So it all translates up the body. So find that foot screw, find that heel, make sure that heel is all the way down. Check your pinky to your heel. Make sure that's sealed down. Follow that big toe, seal down. Again, looking for that tripod in my foot. Find your balance. You can always keep that toe tapped down if that feels a little bit better for you, or go right to a balance. And then check in on those hips. While you're doing that, you might feel your calf work a little bit, but you definitely feel that glute muscle work to help you find that balance here. Of course, you can always then check in on your core, but one thing at a time. Making sure we check on both sides, see which side feels a little bit easier to balance. It doesn't matter how high you balance on or how high you lift your other knee. You're really focused on finding that glute engagement, finding that arch, finding the balance on that single leg. From there, if that again feels really, really easy, find that foot screw, find that balance. You can start to play with what happens when I move my arms around here. If you want to add weights, you can, but you can definitely just work in different ranges of motion and see what happens as you're reaching up, out to the side and down, seeing differences on both sides. This can be used just as balance exercises if that's something you're really focused on getting better at, maybe as a warm-up before you go for a walk, a run, or even before a class, and just to get a little bit of mind-muscle connection going. So again, to start, you want to find that little toe spread. See, do I have trouble even spreading my toes? That goes into our footwear and how strong our feet are. Find that foot screw. This is a super light exercise, so this is something you can do a couple times a week and it won't cause any issues. Really get strong in finding that foot screw, and then from there, tack it onto some exercises. So finding different squats to work in, finding different positions with your squats. Again, find your tripod, find your arches. As the squats get really easy, since I'm working with both legs, transitioning it into your lunges. Again, if my knee is going more forward and my torso is more upright, we're going to end up more in my quad. Or if I allow myself a little hinge, I'm going to get a little bit more in that glute. And one way to tell you're progressing, besides I'm feeling a little bit easier, is maybe you're able to get a little bit lower, or maybe you're able to do a couple more reps or one more set, or add a weight or add a band. Same thing with the bridges. You can always find that tripod, adding in that core, either working with with both legs, with a single leg, your figure 4, or even into that B stance. Play around, see what feels best for you. I always recommend starting with a variation you feel comfortable with, confident in, and building up your strength and balance from there. Once it starts to feel easy and you feel like you could do 20, 30 or more reps, transition to the next challenging exercise. Again, taking away a foot, crossing to that figure 4, working the balance, or maybe working the lunges more than the squats. And as always, make sure you take care of your feet and get them massaged regularly.